All right, so welcome back. My name is Satoshi Takano. We're back here on the Cognition School Podcast. I have a really, really special guest today, and I think you guys would enjoy this because obviously everybody on this podcast, for the most part, are hockey players that skate really, really well, and you're always looking for room to improve. So I have a very good friend of mine here. We share a lot of personal interests. His name is Nam Nguyen, and he's here from Toronto, where I am as well. So welcome to the Cognition School Podcast, bud.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the interview.
Yeah. So some interesting facts. So Nam is a former figure skater, and you even have a Wikipedia page, which is cool. So I'm gonna read this. He's a 2015 World Junior Champion, 29 Skate Canada silver medalist, and a two-time Canadian National Championship. Placed as high as 5th at the World Championships in 2015. So that's really, really cool. So I definitely want to hear a little bit more about that. And yeah, so Nam, share us a little bit about your background and kind of how you got to this point.
Yeah, so I was born in Ottawa.
Okay.
So I was, born and raised in Canada. I moved actually out to Vancouver when I was 1. So I don't really have much recollection of Ottawa, to be honest. And so yeah, I did the majority of my growing up in Vancouver. I started figure skating there. So as some of you may know, I'm a former figure skater. And I actually started out playing hockey at first, but it was very surface level. I wasn't really committed to it. I started playing when I was 4 years old. So I played hockey for maybe 4-5 years, so really not a long time in it. But during that time, I was also balancing figure skating because my parents wanted me to improve my skating skills. So they put me into figure skating. And for a number of years, I was balancing both sports at the same time. When I was 8, I won my first national title in figure skating. And that kind of was the catalyst for me. And making a decision on following up with hockey or figure skating, because it was getting pretty difficult to balance the two sports just for scheduling purposes. And then, yeah, I made the ultimate decision to go with figure skating because for me, I found more interest in jumping and spinning and performing for the audience rather than chasing a puck and getting pummeled into the wall. So that's kind of my childhood. So I definitely did. I had a little bit of experience with hockey, but nowhere near as what I guess your viewers on this podcast has. And yeah, so I skated for almost figure skated for almost 20 years. I retired in 2000. So that was kind of the years of the pandemic. I was lucky enough to represent Canada for many years, go to these competitions, events, and kind of soak all of these experiences in. And then in terms of my involvement with the hockey now, I started coaching skating development as a side job to help pay for my training. I think 2020 or 2020, around those years. And I only had 5 clients at the time, and I'd asked them to not tell anybody about what I was doing because I didn't want to have a following. I didn't want to make this a whole big thing. I just needed something to help pay for my skating. And I was comfortable with that setup. And when I had announced my retirement from skating on Instagram in May of 2020, I guess my 5 clients at the time thought it was the green light to go ahead and tell everybody what I was doing. So from May of 2020 to July 2020, I think I had jumped from 5 clients to maybe close to 100 in the span of 2 months. Yeah. And I was lucky. My biggest fear of retiring from, a 2-decade-long career is that, and especially with my other figure skating friends that I grew up with, the fear is you don't know what to do, right? Your whole identity is based on figure skating. And I guess with hockey, it's a similar thing, right? Especially with the older guys, they're going through their major junior years and hopefully they make it to pro. After you're done, right? What happens next? What are the next steps? Because now you have to deal with real life. And so for me, I was lucky to be able to quickly transition from figure skating to hockey. I'm still on the ice doing, skating development and doing what I love. But at the same time, I'm learning new things. And that's what I like is that I'm still feeling very on edge in the sense of I don't feel settled. I don't feel comfortable because I'm trying to learn something new. And especially with what hockey's offering me, every day is an adventure. And I absolutely love that. And I'm grateful to be able to kind of go through this next chapter of my life, doing things that I genuinely enjoy. And hockey just brings a newfound energy and fulfillment to me that for me, I haven't really felt especially in my last couple of years of competing, due to the pandemic. And yeah, I mean, I've lost track of how many clients I've had at this point, but I definitely, have a great number of people that I have an opportunity to work with. And yeah, like here we are getting to talk to you and all that stuff. So this has
Yeah.
it's been quite amazing, the journey. And I've only been doing this I think now for like officially just under 2 years now. If I started in 2020, yeah, like officially starting 2020, and we're now 2020, so almost 2 years now.
Wow, wow. That's in the business world we call that a growth like a hockey stick, right? So
Yeah.
it's you're like a rocket ship. That's great. That's great. Well, obviously, you're doing great work, and I think, the group comes together because of the work that you do. So,
hmm
and that's the same for us too, that, we don't do it necessarily for money. It's really
No,
just, a means to help other people. So,
absolutely.
yeah, I think it's great. I actually have three areas that I want to touch on
For
with
sure.
what you just said. So, number one, obviously, you said at the age of 8, you
hmm
were a world champion. Is that
No,
correct?
national champion. National
National
champion.
champion, national
Yeah.
champion. Okay, still a champion. So tell me a little bit about that, because I think my audience typically are not just players, but they're mostly parents and coaches. So
Okay.
just in terms of your upbringing to be able to become a national champion, in a sense of your parents and your upbringing,
hmm
were they strict? Were they kind of, hey, kind of let you do your thing? Like, tell me a little
Yeah.
bit more about that.
For sure. So my upbringing, like my parents were very strict on me, especially with my athletic endeavors. So right from the very get-go, my dad was kind of the one that was help guiding me through my process and the early stages of my career. Just as like a background, my parents are immigrant parents from Vietnam. My dad is one of what they would consider a boat refugee. So he escaped Vietnam by boat to start a new life in Canada. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But yeah, no, like my dad, he like when we first got into figure skating, my dad would study. He would like buy these like VCR tapes to kind of study the sport inside out. And he was not athletic. Not neither of my parents were athletic. They didn't do any sports growing up. So this all was a very like a brand new experience for them. But yeah, like going through like the early stages, it was definitely hard. But at the same time, when I look back on those times, like I'm so grateful for, the support that my parents brought me. But they also knew that there was a fine line between, helping me out at home, and then when we get to the rink or to the gym, they let the coaches do the work, right? Because my parents are paying them, right? So they have to do the work and trust in the process. And so it ended up being a great team that I was kind of like insulated by with my parents, taking care of, the stuff that I need at home, like proper nutrition, scheduling, managing all that stuff at home. And then when we get to the rink, that's where kind of like my dad would work with the coaches, and he would ask them, these questions on like certain techniques and for jumps and whatnot. Yeah, like for sure, like growing up in that time, I always thought it was really hard because I had to make a lot of sacrifices. I couldn't go through like the normal kid process in which regular kids could hang out with their friends every day, go to the mall, theater, whatever it was. I rarely did that because I was spending my hours at the rink. So I used to train 7 days a week on the ice. So Monday to Friday would be like 3-4 hours on the ice plus another 2 hours of doing dryland jumps, like stimulating like actual jumps from like on the ice to doing it off the ice. And my dad was actually in charge of that. Like when I was like 8 years old, I remember, I don't know if this is a funny story or whatever, but I'll say it anyways. I grew up in Vancouver and we lived in a condo. Every morning at 5:30, wake up and go down to the underground garage, like the parking garage, and we would do like these off ice jumps. So like I think everybody in hockey will like this for like, sees figure skating and like will associate a triple axel as like the stereotype for figure skating, right? Typically a triple axel is really hard for a young skater to do. Like average age of learning how to do triple axel is 13 to 15 years old. My dad was having me do triple axels off the ice at 8 years old, 7 and 8 years old. And in this garage, like there's like a downward ramp, okay? And it's concrete. Obviously, it's not safe to like pound your joints like that many times on concrete, but Asian parents, they still made us do it. So this particular jump, he had me run down the ramp and launch myself into like this jump. In the air, you rotate 3.5 times in less than a second. Like
What?
it's pretty quick. It's pretty complex. Yeah, for an 8-year-old, like that's kind of impossible.
Wow.
So he made me do that. And so that was kind of like my childhood is waking up every morning, doing off ice jumps with him for 2 hours, going to school. He'd pick me up for at lunch, take me to the rink, and then I would skate from maybe like 1 o'clock, and my day would end at 7 or 8 p.m. during the week. And then the weekends, we would do a couple of hours on Saturday, 1 hour on Sunday. So definitely it was a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, but it helped me get to what I was able to achieve in my career. Two-time national champion, junior world champion, fifth at worlds, international levels. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely an interesting childhood that I had went through, but not something that I would want to change.
Now, what motivated your dad to do that? Like, I mean,
Honestly, I think it's just he wanted the best for me. You know, like going into this, we didn't even like at the time we didn't know figure skating was a thing, right? Like we were playing hockey because it's, you know, the national sport of Canada. Like it's well known from West Coast to East Coast, and my parents wanted me to stay busy and whatnot. I think it just so happened that we were walking by a random figure skating session and we kind of just stood there and watched everything. And my parents were like, "Hey, do you like want to try this out? Maybe this could help you with your skating skills." And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So I got into it, and like I picked up like the interest pretty quickly, and I like was progressing through, you know, whatever was the requirements fairly fast according to my coach at the time. And I just started figure skating like 5 years old, and then 3 years later I'd won my first national title. So yeah, like somewhere, like I think it's on Wikipedia. I don't remember this, but I was told last time that I still have the record for being the youngest Canadian national champion at the age of 8, 9, and 10, 3 consecutive years. And then I won my first senior national, like the top level of Canada at 20 and 29.
wow.
But in terms of like what my dad, like what motivated my dad was, I think he just wanted to help me because growing up we were very poor. We couldn't afford like coaching, and figure skating is generally very expensive. So to help alleviate some of the cost, he would have to like study and try to help out as best as he could. And he, you know, built relationships with coaches and kind of like picked their brains and all that. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that because, you know, fast forward to 2020 and,
Yeah.
you know, like your dad probably would have been called different names only because of the amount of, you know, support that he's given you.
Yeah.
But when you and I grew up, especially being Asian, you know, backgrounds, I
Yes.
think there is an
Yes.
element of, hey, you have to compete. You got to do the best you possibly can. And
Hmm.
so I think I can totally relate to that as well. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, you know, it's tough, right? But when I look back on it, and if you ask me if there's anything that I want to change about the way I went about it, I'd tell you no, because I'm so grateful for all the lessons that my dad has given me. And the majority of these things that my dad has shared with me in terms of like the teachings and the guidance is like some of them I actually use it on my kids, not being harsh or whatever, but just
Right.
kind of like, you know, the wisdom and the patience, being logical about a lot of the things that I try to teach, right? Especially like managing their training plans for skating, like it's a big thing, right? So I'm grateful to my parents in that sense, and in
Mhm.
all senses really, and I'm able to share some of these things to the kids that I get to work with.
Yeah. And when you became that national champion at age of 8, how did that feel for you? Like, did you
I
even
mean,
know that?
I mean, like, I didn't really think of it too much. The only thing that I thought was very cool was that I got to travel from Vancouver to Toronto, and because that's where the national champions were. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, I look at all these dudes and they're like 13, 14, and I was the youngest. Like, I was like, I think 8 years old, as I said, 8 years old. And I'm looking up to these guys and I'm like, holy moly, these guys are like double my size, physically stronger than me. There's a picture of me somewhere on the internet where we're standing on the podium and I'm in the first place position, and second and third, they're obviously lower, but the dudes are still taller than me. You know, so like I was like this like mini dude out there, and like it was just a great experience to, you know, compete against like the best of the best within Canada at what they call juvenile level. You know, that was what really sparked my interest and my desire to keep going for figure skating, was because if I could be competitive with these guys, then I want to try my best even more and see like how far I could go. So yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, obviously, even in the world of hockey too, people kind of get
Hmm.
intimidated by the size, and I understand why. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you know, you got to do you, and you got to do the best you possibly can. I think that's how you got to your national championship. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then the second part to it is actually, that was the second part, but the third, okay, let's talk about the third part. Third part is a transitioning part. So what was it like for you? I mean, you touched on a little bit about, you know, when you officially announced your retirement. What was kind of like the build up to that? I mean, always there was a COVID situation, so that kind
Yep.
of maybe helped to accelerate that a little bit more. What was that build up for you? And then obviously, you know, I'd like to know a little bit about how you transitioned from kind of like that career to to what you do now. How hard was it
Mhm.
for you to do that? Yeah, so if you could tell us a little bit more, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So I think that so first like the season 2020, that's our Olympic season. So the Olympics were held in Beijing, and for the men's event, like the men's discipline in figure skating, like for Canadian men's, we had two spots to go to the Olympics, and that entire like first half of the season going into the Olympics, which were in February, the men's were like we were being monitored, trying to like being tracked to see who would be appropriate to go and represent Canada at the Olympics. One spot was pretty much occupied by actually my best friend. His name is Keegan Messing. He's for those of you that follow my Instagram, I post this dude that will backflip over people. That's him. So basically there was one spot open, right? And it was open to the rest of us. For me, like I was at the point in my career where like I was kind of over it because dealing with the pandemic and like the way our government, our federation kind of like would tell us to get ready for a competition, and then they would say, oh, the event is canceled due to COVID. And then we repeat that process, like get ready and then stop, get ready, stop. It was getting frustrating for me. I was also dealing with a back injury in the summer. And that was actually my first time ever in my career being injured. So I didn't know like how to deal with that because for the first 19 years of like my figure skating career, I was never injured.
Wow.
So that was an experience that we had to, as a team, had to go through, and it was very tough mentally. And then, yeah, so like, for me, I wasn't as motivated as I should have been to try and make a case for myself to take that second spot for the Olympics. And then we had our Olympic trial event, which was in January, which is otherwise known as the Canadian National Championships. The week before that, I actually got COVID. So I was off the ice for 5 days because we had to isolate. And then I literally went from like my condo here in Toronto straight to Ottawa, and I tried, but you know what, it was kind of like the cards were already stacked, and I didn't have, like that fairy tale ending that every athlete in the world dreams for. Mine was kind of like a slow dying regression into retirement. And then to answer the second part of your question is how I was able to transition from figure skating to hockey. It all actually kind of like connects in one way or another. Like at first I used hockey as a shield to get away from figure skating because my last year of figure skating really like put like a twist in my head, and like for a little bit I really hated figure skating, and I would put so much of my time and energy into hockey, and like what that sport offered me was just way more enjoyment, way more fulfillment than figure skating gave me. It's harsh, but that's just my reality of it and my perception of it. And then, I don't know, as time goes on, my relationship with figure skating started to get better. I started doing some work for Skate Canada. Like, I'm a host now for these events. It's where, like, I'll shoot t-shirts out of the cannon.
Yeah, you look pretty happy with that gun
members
there.
You should come watch, man. Like, they put a mic on me and everything, and, like, I try to get the audience hyped up, like, all that. But, yeah, I mean, it wasn't too hard for me to transition from figure skating to hockey. I think just maybe in a business sense, it was obviously a learning curve. I had no experience, but I'm lucky that I'm surrounded by people that help me kind of like navigate the business side of it. In terms of the on ice stuff, I just see it as a performance. Right. From my end, I see it as a performance in the sense where like I can demonstrate these exercises, be competitive with these players, and still feel like I'm being productive. Now, as a coach, and I know that this is something you can attest to, is that we are part of the support staff. So think of F1, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, they're the main drivers. The main drivers are the athletes. We are the ones surrounding them, giving them the resources, the support that they need to become better. I have spent, the first 20, 22, 3 years of my life being the driver, right? And being insulated by so many great figures in my life. I'm now at the point where I'm so happy to take on the role of like supporting these guys and, giving them everything that I can possibly give them so that they can take their athletic careers to the next level. It may not be skating. It could just be the mental support that they need. Sometimes, when I work with these players and I watch them come in, you can see in their eyes that they're not feeling great. They're not feeling the best. We'll have an easy session and it's mainly just me hyping them up and having them feel supported because they see me quite often, right? And like one day we're not pushing or breaking records. I think that's okay as long as they come out of the session feeling good about themselves. And that was something that I had as a figure skater, right? Like my coaches knew when was the right time to push, when was the right time to just be there mentally and provide that moral support. And it's been such a great experience these last couple of years, managing these athletes and supporting them and doing my best as a coach.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you with that support role too. I mean, it's after a
Mm.
while, everybody's career does come to an end, right? So you want to be able to then kind of take that supporting role and help other guys, even go further
Yep.
than where you went, right? So
Of course. Yeah. And I'm so happy to see like there's times where like especially with my older guys, I like will place bets with them. So sometimes like it'll be a new stick, it'll be like some new like recovery equipment. There was one time last summer during my programming, one of my programmings, I had put $1,000 on the table for these guys.
what?
And the bet was the first person to go 5 bar downs gets $1,000. Nobody got it, thankfully, but one guy hit 4 bar downs and they were all in, like they have to be in, like it can't just be like bar down but out, right? They have to like count as a goal. So his 5th bar down did not cross the goal line, and like thankfully my $1,000 that day was saved. But those are just things that kind of like help motivate these guys, right? Obviously these are considered short term, but in the grand scheme of things, these are like little building blocks that build up to a positive connection between myself as the coach and then the clients as the skaters.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, because as much as we could talk about technique and the technical
Yeah.
aspects of things, we always have to resonate with them and
Yes.
figure out what buttons do we need to push to get them to do what we want
Yep.
them to do. And everybody's different, right? Like you and I both know.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
whether it be monetary or I mean, I do the same thing here too. I said, hey, if you beat some of our records, then you get
Yeah.
$100, and the kids are like, okay.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh, that's all it took. But I know some parents do
I work
this
the same
today.
way. As a skater, I work the same way. I worked the same way when I was competing. Like when I landed my first triple axel on the ice, my coach in Vancouver gave me $100 and an iPad.
No way.
Yeah. So like that's where like the whole like over the top monetary gifts from that comes from, is because my coaches spoiled me whenever I landed these jumps, and like I want to be able to provide a similar experience to these guys. Obviously not do it frequently because then they
Right.
become numb to it or immune to it. But yeah, like keeps them on edge. But at the end of the day, like as you said, like everybody has a different style of work, right? The techniques that I give them, it's pretty universal when I teach it like to a group. But then when I start individualizing these kids, then I start to like pinpoint like certain characteristics that will help, complement their skating to be more efficient.
Mhm.
And like that's like another thing is that like, I try to keep it similar to like a figure skating session, is when in the sense of like everybody has different jumping styles, different skating styles, right? But like how can we get them to the next level if I just teach them a universal thing? It doesn't work like that, right?
Mhm.
They have to know what my expectations are, right?
Right.
Then they apply it. Now you have what Nam wants. Now if you want what you want, that's when I come to you and I'd be like, okay, now you can't skate like this guy, but if you want to be in the same speed output or faster, this is what's going to work for you. But and it's not going to work for him because his body's not built like that. So it's been a lot of studying that I've had to do to, be able to deliver what I deliver.
Mhm.
But it's been such an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, no, and even the learnings that you mentioned earlier too, that like what have you learned in the last 2 years that you've been doing this? Obviously, hockey players, they look different, right? Like you could just
Yeah.
tell walking down the street, okay, that guy's a hockey player, that guy's a baseball player, right? Like I can
Yes.
tell, right? And obviously, like most hockey players have like, kind of thicker kind of quads, pretty big glutes if you're a defenseman, especially.
Yes. Yep.
That's kind of me, right? Like I mean, it's almost like the sport kind of defined who you are. What have you kind of learned? I mean, transitioning from figure skating to hockey.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that like as someone that comes from the figure skating world and is teaching or contributing to the hockey world, is that my job is not to teach you how to skate like a figure skater. Okay, and that's like I think the biggest misconception is that like we're supposed to make you look like figure skaters. That's not it. Our job is to make you better and efficient using techniques that are inspired from the figure skating world. I can never make somebody have beautiful posture, present out like that. That's not what it is. Like, why would you perform artistically, right, to the people watching you? No, my job is to help you get from point A to point B as fast as possible, and also in the manner where you're not overexerting yourself. That's my job. And that's through different techniques, right? The art of utilizing different techniques from figure skating is something that I am using in hockey, right? It's like, let's say I'm trying to teach a punch turn. Right? Like the way I teach a punch turn, there's a lot of moving parts to it, but the biggest thing is having a wide stance, right? Because the wider your feet and the more on top you are, the quicker you can actually flip and get back around to where you started from. But another thing is using the upper body as well. A lot of times when you're watching these players is they're teetering their shoulder on an angle like this. You do that, right? Your blades are most likely dull because you're skating so often. You're going to slip off your edge, right? You're not going to create space between you and the defender. If you twist your shoulders, rotate your head, shoulder, chest, open up the inside rib cage, you will be way more efficient and you will have speed and flow coming out. So it's very like particular in the approach that I have when teaching techniques of skating, finding different ways to gain speed without, as I said, overexerting yourself. And then another thing that I learned, and now just observing players and watching different games almost every night, is that hockey is a very like quick on your feet kind of thing, right? So that also has affected the way that I teach stuff, is because you can isolate forward inside edges 100 times up and down the ice. How is that going to benefit your game if you're not going to make it in a practical situation? So the first part of my training block, I will isolate, right? Exercises, give them my terminology and definitions. After a couple of weeks of that, we start putting that in patterns of like game type situations with pucks, finish it with a shot, and then we'll add a defender to really chase after you, but you still need to start thinking about proper technique and how to get yourself out of these situations. All of that comes from figure skating. So in figure skating, we have this thing called programs where we perform to our music. So we have a short program and a long program. It's like a sprint basically, or it's a marathon / sprint, whatever you want to call it. Short program, you have 3 jumps, 3 spins, blah, blah, other things, all done within 2.5 minutes. A long program, you have 7 jumps, 3 spins, choreography, all done within 4 minutes. So that's pretty physically taxing. To build up to that, you have to break it down into sections, right? This is where the practicality stuff comes in with hockey, is like you piece things together, right? And then with figure skating, your goal is to obviously put all of it together at once. Hockey, it's different. You don't put together at once, but you can build sections of, set patterns that you would do according to your position. So right winger, you do something on the right wall. For defensive players, you do something along the blue line. But it's all, for me, skating base, where we're focusing on the edges, body alignment, and being reactive. And then once you've built the confidence there, it all becomes clockwork. And then that's something I'm guessing you teach, is like making sure your brain operates like a clock. You don't have to think, it's quick reaction.
That's right.
Like as your podcast says, ReactForge.
That's right. That's exactly how we started too. So no, that's interesting. The other thing that you kind of touched on just now, and it kind of triggered in my head too, music, right? Mm-hmm. That you guys are moving and choreographing to music. Obviously there's tempo in there, the faster the tempo is, the faster you tend to skate.
Yes.
So, I mean, we here, when we train our guys here, we teach tempo, and we even have a metronome that we use to do that. Mm-hmm. So we're not trying to teach guys to be really fast or almost too fast, right? Or even too slow. So there's somewhere in between, and that's really tempo driven, right? Is that correct? Do you kind of think that as well? Like when you're watching players like that you work with, that, hey, it's not always just about getting from point A to point B the fastest you can. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have the puck and now you need to start kind of looking around and buying some time, but there is like a tempo thing going on in your head.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think about that, it's kind of like controlled pacing, right? In the sense that when I use controlled pacing, I actually use it more so of a technique assistant. So if I'm teaching forward strides, I usually start at 60 of their maximum output, right? That's their warm up. So we'll work on 60, get the technique right, 70, 80, 90. As we increase the pacing, that actually doesn't mean we're increasing power. We're increasing the tempo of your stride. And like when you hit that maximum extension and you switch to the other side, that's like, boom, boom. That's what I'm looking for in terms of the pacing, controlled tempo. My version of a controlled tempo is actually, as I said, just more so of a technique-based thing. I don't teach the scanning part because I know nothing about that, right? But definitely tempo is something that I heavily use in a lot of like my exercises and patterns that I set out for these kids. And it helps, right? Because not all the time will you be required, as you said, to go like guns blazing, like fast, like it just doesn't work, because you need time to recover in certain plays and then you can ramp it up, right? Like you can go up, you can go down, up and down. Like it's all about how you can manipulate the situation. And I think that's really important for hockey players, is that like, yes, you're on the ice with 9 other people there, and four of them being your teammates, but you can create plays by slowing things down, right? With your skating, with your scanning, and take control of the situation, right? Like we need to have control. So that's where slow and steady concept really comes into play.
Yeah, no, that's really, really important for our listeners because I don't think they get that. They just want to be sprinting from point A to point B as quickly as we can, and they don't really understand the concept of time. Right. So,
Right.
I've got a music background, growing up as well. So I can appreciate the speed of the tempo and what you're talking about. So, I think just listen to music. Like I know people listen to music and I think it's almost like you want to internalize that, I always used to think of a song in my head while I'm playing and I would go and do my stuff and I would skate exactly at tempos. That's something that I grew up. I actually grew up with figure skaters as well.
Nice.
So claim to fame was with a woman by the name of Marianne Watkins, and she was working with the Penguins at the time, and she trained me a long time ago, and that was one of the key aspects of it. So so let's talk about efficiency because I think this is something that I think a lot of our listeners want to know. You're skating in the long program. You said 4 minutes long, which I didn't even know, so I'm learning something too. So 4 minutes and 7 jumps.
7 jumps, 3 spins, and like there's 2 sets of choreography patterns that we do.
Okay.
And that's all jam-packed in 4 minutes of skating.
Okay, so I got tons of questions about that. So number one, you said you've never been injured except in, was it 2021?
Yeah, so my last year of skating, yeah.
So you did all of that, putting so much strain on your body for a 4-minute program, and that's the first time you got injured.
First time.
Right? How do you for a 4-minute program? Because from a cardio perspective, from a muscular perspective, from a cognitive perspective, that's a huge strain. For hockey guys, we're on the ice 30 to 45 seconds and then we're off. Right. So how do you prepare for a 4-minute program like that?
Absolutely. So I think there's what it boils down to is like in the figure skating world, like when you're watching somebody compete, right, and they're not doing well in their long program, simply you'll say they need to do more run-throughs, more like practice of their programs. But it's a little bit more complicated than that because if you think about it, doing 7 jumps, 3 spins, let's say 1 spin takes about 20 to 30 seconds. And you have to multiply that by 3. Going into a jump, it takes about 5 to 10 seconds leading up into the jump, and you have to multiply that by 7, right? And then the choreography patterns, they take about another 20 to 30 seconds per pattern. There's not a lot of rest time in between each element, and this just boils down to repetition, and repetition. This is where you break it down into parts. You'll do the first 3 jumps of the program, right? You'll take a break, second set of 3, and then you'll do the final 2, go right to the end of the program, right? After you start building these parts, then you start to make it into halves. So what I explained first was in 3s. Now you do in half. First half of the program, second half of your program, right? And then I haven't even talked about including the spins. The spins are really the ones that take you out because you're spinning so fast, you don't even breathe in your spins.
How do you not
tough.
even get dizzy? I watch it and I'm like, how do you not get dizzy doing that? But
that just comes from practice. Like being able to not get dizzy after, it takes a little bit of practice, but once you are you can't spot. So I don't know if you've ever watched ballet, but when they do like a pirouette, they're spotting their head, right? So when I'm turning, my head will stay and then I'll come around like that. That's spotting. In figure skating, you don't. You literally just go like that.
Seriously?
Yeah, you can't spot because if you spot, it slows down the rotation. That's why ballet, like when you see them pirouette, you'll see their head boom, boom. But in figure skating, it's like pop, pop, pop. So that's a factor that contributes to us being dizzy. But for jumps, we don't because it just happens in like less than a second. It's like a millisecond, bang, bang, you're done. But yeah, going back to the point is it just takes a lot of practice, a lot of like compartmentalization and then combining these. And then when you're at the point of running from start to end, you have to do that over and over and over and over. And then you practice it in like a simulation. You'll do like a 6-minute warm because everybody's on the ice for 6 minutes in the beginning, and then you'll have judges watching, they'll provide feedback. So that's kind of our simulation to help prep for the actual event. So it just comes down to practice.
Now, so to that, there's a cardio element, right? Because you gotta stay in shape for that. And then there's also a strength element, but you can't you can't be too bulky, right? Like you can't be
No,
muscular. So like
no.
what's the balance between that? Like,
Obviously, yeah, you have to be lean in order to kind of like go far in figure skating. There's not a lot of strength training. Like we're not lifting a lot of weights. Like as you can see, like my arms are like noodle arms. But if you, and that's only for singles though. Like that's only for singles. If you do pairs, so if you're skating with like your partner and you have to lift them, yes, you have to do weight training. But
right.
for someone like myself, it's all about like body weight workouts, quick reactions, because when you jump, you have to be quick explosives. When you land, you have to be able to quickly react if you're going to add a second jump after the first jump. There's a lot of core training, and then the final piece to top it all off is the cardio. So when I look back in my career, I did more cardio training than I did for strength training because strength wasn't really the biggest requirement. Obviously, there is a certain level of strength that you need to have, but nowhere near as strenuous as hockey.
Yeah, yeah. Would you say that there's like, I mean, compared to a hockey player today, which, a lot of focus is on power,
Yeah.
right? On that stride. Do you think there should be some kind of a balance between kind of, what you're describing, where it is about efficiency? It's not always about power because, I mean, for hockey players, we're not just going in a straight line, like you said, and we're
Yeah.
also not doing patterns, right? Where there's not a
Yes.
thing to say, here's what you must do. But what do you recommend for someone listening to this, where they're really pushing, I want my kid to be more powerful and I want that stride to be powerful, right? Like what do you say to that?
What I say to that is, why do you want to put all of your eggs into that basket of want to be all powerful? Think about it like this. You can be the most trained athlete in the world, right? And if you go all out, like 100%, right? Shift after shift, you're going to kill yourself. Doesn't matter how trained or how conditioned you are, right? Why don't you take a book out of like the efficiency page, like the page out of the efficiency book, and like find different ways in which you can still achieve maybe 90, 80% of that power, but still last much longer, right? Like, for example, crossovers. And this is something that I learned from who I consider as a mentor, Michelle Davison. She is the Leafs skating coach, Maple Leaf skating coach. She's the one that kind of like got me into the power skating as well. When we're doing crossovers, whether it's going up the ice or going around the corner, right? You have that first push and then you cross over. In the figure skating approach teaching way, you just go push, that's it. But if you want to make it more efficient and you want to get that speed without exerting yourself too much, you're actually going to push and launch forward when you cross over. You're going to launch over your pinky toe. That way you have a little bit of a skip in your step. Instead of just stepping down, push, stepping down, it's kind of flatlining your skating, whereas you have that dynamic energy. If you watch Cale Makar or Nathan McKinnon, there's a skip in their crossovers.
Pop, looks like a prancing horse.
Exactly. But the key is they're not jumping up and down. And you see a lot of minor hockey players do that, especially when they're doing crossovers up the ice. They're like leaping into the air. That's sorry, but that's kind of dumb. Like you're losing energy, right? You're losing power. Contain that power in a stance, like a squat, and pop your energy forward. Pop, pop, pop. That's how you can efficiently gain speed, right? And next thing you know, you could actually be skating a lot faster if you went efficiency over just all out power. Like you're just massively pushing and you're gassing yourself out. I remember when I first started coaching and I was coaching hockey players, I would say like, let's say you're trying to like outrace the other guy to prevent an icing call. Okay. You're skating really fast. He's skating really fast. Both of you are similar techniques, raw power, right? You're both going to gas yourself out. Now, why don't you switch the approach and focus purely on efficient technique, big toe push, tight pass through, stepping in front. That's how I would teach forward strides. That's way more efficient. And you could get that extra step in front of him and not feel tired and prevent that icing call, whereas he's already gassed and he can't defend you anymore, right? Like that's kind of like my analogy of things. It's probably not the greatest way that I described it, but to me, it makes perfect sense. But I think that, you know, when these parents come to me and they're like, can you get my kid to be more powerful? I'm like, then don't come to me. That's not my job. I'm not going to teach your kid how to be powerful. Like, I know nothing about strength training. Go to your dryline guy to help you do that. What I can help you do is get your skater to skate faster through efficient manners that will make them look powerful, feel powerful, but at the end of the day, not kill themselves too much. Yeah, during my sessions, your kids will die, but in games, they'll apply what you practice and turn it into a practical situation.
Yeah, no, that's super, super important piece of information because I grew up kind of skating that way that you're describing because I was not a big guy, right? So if I'm going into a corner in the defensive zone, I better get there quick, number one, but number
Yep.
two, I got to watch out for the guys that are putting pressure on me. So I have to
Yes.
resist that, and then while being efficient too. And I think that's where I remember all my coaches used to tell me, they're like, Satoshi, like, you look so fluid on the ice when I'm
Yep.
skating. And to the point where, so I used to be a forward growing up, and then my coach found out that I actually skate backwards probably as fast as I skate forwards.
Yeah.
So he said to me, you should probably try defense. And then that changed my entire career. Because I used to watch a lot of figure skating when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why is it that they're traveling so far with one stride, right? Like, especially on that build up, like you described for a jump. Like, how is it that they're skating so far with just one push or one or two pushes?
Yeah.
So that drove me to try to figure it out, and I think you're hitting it bang on.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, just being overall efficient. But my biggest thing, though, is that my job is not to teach you how to skate like a figure skater. There's a lot of figure skating coaches out there that is now into power skating, right? Especially in Ontario, it's a pretty big market. But, like when I watch Michelle teach or Paul Matheson, right? They both come from a very heavy figure skating background. You don't see them teaching figure skating stuff. You see them teaching hockey skating styles, but through a figure skating manner, just like being efficient, right? Like those two coaches for me are like my big idols, because what is the reason? Well, your kid is never going to jump on the ice, like do like triple axels on the ice and whatnot, right? They're not going to hold an edge to look good, right? You're not being judged on that. You can hold an edge to like come around the corner if you're not doing a punch turn, right? But other than that, like being efficient is so key, especially with how fast the sport is today and all that. And like I always say, William Nylander is like the prime example of like my teaching. Like I base a lot of like I pull a lot of like knowledge that, I see from him, and I try to like internalize that with what I would teach and then deliver that information out. Because he to me is like one of the most efficient players in the league right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that use of the upper body, like you said, is something that like I watch it, I'm like, how's he skating that way, right?
Like when you watch him do his punch turns, you will never see him tilt his shoulder like this, right? Like he's twisting, he's rotating the body that way, like he can go quick around. But if you're tilting, you're going to fall off your edge. And it's the same with doing crossovers. Let's say you're recovering in your own zone and you're going behind the net, right? When you're doing like your crossovers, like let's say to the right, okay, the net's going to be on your right side. I will always say open your ribcage up so that your bones are exposed to the net, which is on your right-hand side. That way, because it's a tight circle behind the net, you have to be able to stay on top of the feet to get that push, cross, push, cross, push, cross. There's some people out there that teach.
Because normally you think you got to lean into the turn like a motorcycle.
You can't. No, because if you do that, you're going to slip off your edge, right? And there's no power because now, like, I don't know, I'm going to stand and demonstrate. I'm such a nerd about this, but like,
I love it.
So like, I'm going to be headless for now, but like, let's say the net would be here, right? Like my bag is the net and I'm doing crossovers this way, right? So I tell my skaters, they got to open up the rib cage like this. That way, when they're on the circle, their hips can dip in, but now my power is still on my feet and the feet is driving the crossovers, push, cross, cross. But if you teach it in this way, look at my power. I'm already on the ice. Okay, and I'm going to slip off of my edge. So those are like different things that I try to like pinpoint for my guys. And I remember a couple of summers ago, it was the first time I had LA guys, OHL guys, and we spent 45 minutes doing a set pattern of like doing that included crossovers behind the net. 45 minutes. And I told them about this ribcage idea. And they came to me after like the next day and they were like, damn, like that was just life-changing because they have so much more grip on the ice and power output and they can fly without catching your edge and crashing into the wall.
It's interesting because Rio actually did speed skating for a couple sessions just to try it out.
Yeah.
And I remember specifically, and I think in speed skating it might be the opposite because you do have quite a bit of edge to hold you.
Yes.
So they kind of lean into the turn and they're crossing over.
Yeah.
And I saw Rio when he was skating for the first time and he's kind of making those left turns. He was already kind of doing the opposite and trying to, and I have a video of it and I could send it to you because I think it's kind of interesting. So I noticed, I'm like, oh, okay, like that's a little bit different because he's afraid of losing that edge. But in
For
speed
sure.
skating, like you're almost like really, especially for the short track, right? Like it's
Yeah.
like you really gotta lean into it, right?
You have to lean into it. They lean into it because their strides are much longer, which means that their edge will be longer. Whereas in hockey, we have to be quick. So it's push, right? It's not choppy, but it's still quicker than what you would do for speed skating,
Yep.
which is why with that frequent movement, our body is more susceptible to kind of like bouncing all over the place.
Right.
That's why we lock it into that open ribcage position and keep this still so that now our legs can do the work. But I can see, yeah, like I understand why speed skating, they lean into the circle and they also have that hand on that ice to kind of like support their weight a little bit while maintaining those long strides or crossovers rather.
Yeah. What do you notice with like I mean, obviously you talked a little bit about the crossovers and the jumping up and down. Let's say they're skating kind of in a straight line. Like when you kind of do kind of an assessment where you're seeing them for the first time, what's kind of like the most common things that you see in a young player's stride?
Yeah, for forward strides, there's a few things. The first one is their upper body. If they're hunched over, if they look like they have a hunchback and their shoulders are up, that's a big red flag. Second is their actual stride. Right, the leg. If they're not hitting that maximum extension, right, and they're just donkey kicking up, highly efficient. And then you see the types of skaters where they have both of those happening, the hunchback and the donkey kick. And those are like my favorite players to work with because I can now fully manipulate your body into what I want so that we can change your skating. I have this skater, he's 20, he plays for North York Rangers. When I first started with him, he was the example of two like major faults going on in his stride. I asked him to see me 3 times a week and he did. And I think after 3 weeks, his stride's so much better. His bum is now into a deeper squat position. He's fully extending that free legs, the leg that's doing the stride, into his big toe because you always have to push and flick the big toe. And he's now lifting up his chest, activating the lower back. He looks like a completely different skater. But those are kind of like my things that I look at when I see forward strides, right? Younger guys, like I have a better time fixing because the older dudes, they have a very set way in their head that they think that their way is the right way. But then when I bring in like my 20 kids and I show them the forward strides, they're like, okay, we'll give that a try, you know. But then again, everybody has different style of skating, so I have to like cater to their style, but also maintain my line of work that I've tried to research on and tried to build upon. Their job is just to take pieces of that and inspire their own style of skating.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you use all these nicknames, right? Like you have your donkey kicks and your hunchback. Like, I see that a lot. I mean, for a while actually, it's almost like some coaches actually like that style. Where I remember like one of the broadcasters used to say, "Look at Marner skating. You know, you see how his numbers are actually pointing to the ceiling, right?" And people used to, well, not people, but I just remember watching that broadcast, and it was specifically that game that I think it was in the playoffs. Ovechkin between Washington and the Leafs. Ovechkin gets out of the penalty box. It was a the Leafs run a power play. Time expires on the penalty. Ovechkin gets on a breakaway because someone hits him with the pass. Marner sees it and he hustles back. I don't know if you remember this play, but
I haven't seen this one. No,
he literally stopped him like on that breakaway, and I'm gonna stitch that video in for the viewers once we edit this. But it's exactly that, and they said, look at how his digits are pointing to the ceiling. He's you know, his hunchback. That's literally how they talked about it.
Right.
But this is going back, I forget how many years ago now, 5, 6, 7 years, right? So
okay.
I don't know if you've noticed any changes in his skating specifically, because he kind of tends to do that. Because even growing up, I think he is
more forward pitch than the other players that I see. But at the end of the day, if that works and he feels that is his most efficient way of getting from point A to point B, what am I to say about that? Right? Like you know, my job is just to help those that come to me and want to be better at skating, especially with this. Like the case of that 23 that I have. I know that I cannot get that much speed out of him if he's hunched back and he's donkey kicking up like that. If I can, and he's a very small kid too. So if I can really expand his body and like open him up more, right? And allow him to use like his limbs, right, to the maximum capabilities that they're built for, he can skate so much faster and feel like he's not doing a lot of work. Because whenever I asked him to go up and down in his old technique, by the time he comes down, he's gassed, right? But then when we go up and down with the new technique, he's not gassed, right? But he's skating so much faster, right? So we're hitting two birds with one stone, like changing a little bit of the body positioning, right? Doesn't take a lot of work really, and you're achieving faster speed and better efficiency with the cardio.
I think the efficiency is key. That's the one piece that a lot of people don't consider. But there's a movie that I used to watch, Days of Thunder, with Tom Cruise. You ever watch that?
And no, I haven't seen it.
So there was a scene where Tom Cruise, he's coming up in NASCAR, and he knows nothing about driving a race car. He just learned to go really fast, just pedal to the floor, and then his mechanic says, okay, I think is Cole. Cole is the character's name. He says, Cole, you're gonna drive 50 laps your way, and after you're done, you're gonna drive 50 laps my way.
Yeah.
And they compare the tires after his way and the mechanic's way. Looks totally different. One's all mashed up, beaten up, like can't win Daytona with that type of tires, and then does it this way, and then the efficiency, you see it. It's kind of a fun scene, but it is depicting what you're describing. That you whatever might work for you today, but obviously the game is changing. You and I both know that. To be able to find that efficiency is something that you got to treat yourself like a Formula One car, like we talked about earlier, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's different inputs, small adjustments that can make a huge difference, right? I can try to move heaven and earth to change the skating, but I would much rather do small approaches, tweak it, right? That can already make a huge difference, and then keep building it with other tweaks, right? And especially with the older guys, because they've already they're set with their body, they're set with their technique. So for me, I think it's easier to work with them because all I do is just like, hey, I need you to be a little bit more aggressive with the toe push on that forward stride, or hey, I need you to actually pop off of that pinky toe when you do your crossover, that way you're launching forward, right? Those are small tweaks, but those small tweaks make a huge difference. Like efficiency, it comes in all shapes, forms, whatever, and it's unique to each player. It's our job as coaches to kind of research and play around, experiment with what works for this type of person and what works for a different set of person, I guess, right? So,
yeah. No, this was great. This is we could talk for hours about this stuff. This is really
I know. I feel like I love this because I get to nerd out on what I've learned and learning from you as well. Honestly, I wanted to also tell you this for me is so incredible because this is my first interview outside of figure skating.
No way.
All of my interviews that I've ever done has been related to figure skating, and I was telling my girlfriend today, I am so stoked to be doing this interview because this is about hockey, and I get to learn from you and share with you the things that I've learned and what I've seen and all that, and it's just been so much fun, and just showing you the crossovers with the net kind of thing, that really just got me going. I was so excited for it.
We're gonna do more of this stuff. I guarantee it.
Absolutely, man. I would love to.
Oh, I do have to wrap up because we could probably talk for hours, but we'll probably do an episode here when you're here, and we'll cut some really good clips. But thank you so much again. I know that this is incredibly valuable for our audience, and let us know where can some of our people reach out to get in touch.
Yeah, so I only reachable through Instagram. So search up Nam Nam Noodle. Nam Nam Noodle, send me a DM and I will try to get back to you. If you want to do the more formal way, my email is namnamnoodle@yahoo.com. And we can figure something out. But I don't have a website or anything. I post some of my work on Instagram. But yeah, that's kind of what everybody's been doing. So
That's great. What's the history behind Nam Nam Noodle?
Okay, so I did not come up with this. So back in 2020, I was training at the Toronto Cricket Skating and Curling Club. That's off Avenue and Wilson. And I was training with this pair girl. She's from Russia. And one day she just came in and looked at me and was like, Nam, you look like a noodle. I'm going to start calling you. I know, because I was so skinny back then. I literally was a twig or a noodle, whatever you want to say. And she literally comes up to me in her thick Russian accent. I'm not going to say it, but she's like, Nam, you look like a noodle. I'm going to call you Nam Noodle from now on. And I'm like, all right, I kind of like that. So my Instagram name at the time was called Nam Skating, but I thought that was way too basic. So then I changed it to Nam Nam Noodle, and I've kind of stuck with that since then. Everybody, even my own skaters call me Noodle, whatever. But that's how my name came to be.
Oh man, that is awesome. You know what? That sticks too. So that's good.
Yeah, but I think I do need to change my email though because I want to have some sort of professionalism. I gotta not maybe
I
use Nam Nguyen,
no,
but we'll
I
see.
think it
We'll
works. I
see.
think it works. Speaking of which, we'll do noodles too. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Good stuff, man. No, I really appreciate your time. This has been incredibly valuable. We'll definitely have you on again. And yeah,
Absolutely.
looking forward to having you here or going out and going out for coffee. So thanks very much for the day, and we'll
Thank
talk
you
to you
so
soon.
much, Satoshi. I appreciate it. Today was so much fun. Thank you.